Hey, welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming in tonight. We've got a really, really cool evening for you. We're going to keep this informal. We're going to dive right in because a lot of folks were saying, hey, look, tough night for me to get out. So I want to make sure I respect everybody's time. And we're going to talk about something that really, I think, has had it's a topic that a lot of people wonder about, like, how am I going to finance my deals? So we're going to talk about that tonight. So let's bring in our guest. This gentleman I learned about him through the Jake and Gino program. He is a coach there. He has purchased a lot of multifamily. He's done so creatively, and he's even become an author recently with his book that was released called Creative Cash, appropriately so. And tonight we're going to dive into that. So we're going to get a really good overview. I'll start things out, but as questions come up, I want everybody to raise your digital hand and make sure you pop up here, and we'll get your questions up to Bill. If you want to put them in the chat, go for it, but much prefer we do it live. So please do that. Let's start with where you're coming from tonight. Go ahead and type in the chat box where you're calling in from tonight, so we have an idea of that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Bill Ham. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you. Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's start with a little bit of your background. I kind of gave an overview. You've been an investor for a while, but is that what you've always done? Was it like, hey, I hit high school, graduated, and I started buying multifamily property?
No, I wish. No, graduated high school and then spent the next 7.5 years getting out of college. That was only one degree that I got.
Not a doctor?
Not a doctor. Barely a graduate. So he got out of college and started flying airplanes for a living, and didn't take long to figure out that job sucked, and I didn't want to do it. So I was sitting around and I was watching friends of mine flip houses, and I kind of had an aha moment when I thought, my friends are idiots and they're making more money than I am, and this sucks. And so I really started to figure out what was this real estate thing that they were all out there doing. This is back in 2003, 2004. I've been in the business almost 16 years now. And long story, that's basically how I got started. I was watching other people flip houses thinking, look, there's nothing special about them. We were all sitting at the bar last night having a drink, and they got up and flipped houses, and I got up and went to work. And I went, wait a minute now. So, that was kind of my aha moment when I went, hold on. And I started looking into real estate. I studied for about a year before I did my first deal. So just reading all the books I could get, taking classes, did all the normal stuff, nervous as hell about doing a deal. And then I finally did my first deal, which was a duplex. And I had saved up about 10 grand, and I had $300 net cash flow from the duplex, if nothing broke. And I said, I'm out of here, quit my job and went into real estate full time. Certainly don't recommend that for anyone listening. Let me throw out that caveat. I was 28 years old, no kids, no family, no debt, no problem. So I figured I have worst case scenario. If I just completely screw this real estate thing up, I'll just go get another job.
Get a job.
And just go back to work. And so that's how I got started. And unfortunately enough, I did not screw it up much. All at once. There are a lot of mistakes made, just not all at one time, and I survived them. And so, I've been doing it for about almost 16 years now. My portfolio's been over 1,000 units, and I did my first 402 units without using any kind of lender bank, without using any traditional financing. So all creative financing, lease options, seller financing, private debt, hard money lenders, the neighbors, credit cards, you name it. I was getting real estate funded just about every way you could think of. And so now some years later, I believe that we have an interesting market that is upcoming. And I think we've got some interesting stuff that's going to be happening in the market over the next year that's going to last several years out. And I think creative financing is going to be a very viable skill set to have over the next couple of years. That being said, it's obviously not something that's been used all that much for the last few years. Market's been pretty hot. So that's why it's just maybe sort of a newer subject for some people.
That's what we call an open loop right there. The loop is open now that we've got this anticipatory, I think over the next few years, and obviously we'll close that loop. But I want to dive into a couple of quick things real quick. So
sure.
First off, the duplex was it Atlanta, right where you are, or was it
Macon, Georgia, actually. I'm in Atlanta now. Yep. And the duplex is in Macon, Georgia. If you don't know where that is, that's not surprising. And a small town, middle of nowhere. In 2008, I think we were listed in Forbes. We were the 7th most impoverished city in America. So very, rough town. rough demographic, lower income, just down the board. And I started off in a really bad neighborhood in a pretty tough city. I headed into a 100-year recession that I didn't know was coming. So I was like, I say, so what was your excuse? Like, look, I'm just a normal guy. If I can survive all of those things, like, you'll be fine. Trust me. So yeah, tough neighborhood. We categorize things A, B, C, and D in real estate. The multifamily, A, B, and D is sort of D, your war zone, right? D would have been an upgrade for where I got started. We're talking like full on F down there, man. That place is rough and tough, hard neighborhood, and I clawed my way out of that and continued to bring value to sellers. And that's what I teach now is how to bring value to sellers with these tools. And I just kept doing it, and started getting bigger and bigger. Got into small multifamily, started doing larger. The largest property I've done was 294 units was the largest. Next one was like 196 with some seller financing. So I've been up in the large commercial, but started down small as well. So I did the whole gambit.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to talk about real quick is whether or not. So I've been on my soapbox recently about the idea of doing deals, and actually be curious for those of you that are watching live. This is also going to be out there on YouTube if you're watching us there. Thank you. For those of you watching live, like what's your unit count? Like how many units are you invested in, if any? Are you brand new, haven't started yet, or how many do you have? But for those who haven't started yet, I've made this point often, and you made reference to the fact that, hey, look, you didn't screw it up bad enough to have to go get a job, but you made mistakes along the way. And I've been on my soapbox about, I think what a lot of people do is they get lost in the idea of doing it perfectly, and then they don't do a deal, right? They kind of get paralysis analysis. You did a deal in an F market, as you said, an F class market, if there is such a thing. And probably wouldn't buy that today, but at the time it worked. You purchased, you were in, and it served you. So my thesis has been, hey, look at some deals. If it makes sense, buy it. You're going to make mistakes. You likely will have a loss. Not saying you have to have a loss, but you'll likely have some losses along the way. It doesn't mean an overall loss, but 1 year might not be a cash flow year. Yeah. You might be negative cash flow a year or two. Is that still the right move, though? Is it better to have it than to not?
Yeah, I think so completely. And I have a lot of different philosophies on this. One of them is if you buy one and you screw it up, buy two. If you buy two and screw it up, buy 10. You'll get it right eventually. Just don't quit, right? It's about starting and not stopping, right? One of the biggest mistakes you can make is trying too hard to avoid mistakes in the first place, right? You've got to embrace the fact that you're going to make some mistakes. Number one. Number two, it's not going to be as bad as you think. Look, and if it's stopping you from getting started, then that's the biggest mistake you can make. So I absolutely agree, Jamie. It's like you just got to get out there. You got to have some tolerance for failure. You really do. I have a lot of students, a lot of people come up to me at different seminars and events, and they say, oh, I need you to teach me how to do it, because I can't fail. I can't make a mistake. I tell them right out of the gate, I can't help you. There's nothing I can do for you. The second you just told me that you can't make a mistake and you need me, stop, conversation over. There's nothing I can do to help you because you've already got such a losing mindset. You're going to freak out the first time any little thing happens. And the tough part about it being an entrepreneur, forget real estate, just an entrepreneur in general, is the cavalry is not coming. You are the tip of the spear. If you lose your cool, there's nobody coming to save you. It's like everybody's looking at you to be the one. You can't crack. You got to make it happen. The only deal, as I say, the only deal you really ever have to close is the 6 inches between your ears. It's the most important deal you'll ever close, right? It's the first and the last of your deals. And if you can't close that one, you're not closing anything else. But I think an attitude of failure is absolutely the right mindset. Get started. Don't overthink it. Just get started.
Love it. No, I appreciate that. All right, let's dive in. So the first 402 units you did through creative financing. So the first question I have is, how many methods of creative financing have you used? Can you give those to us? Do you have a list of those?
That's funny. That is the first time anybody has ever actually asked me that question. I'm glad you're recording this. I'd have to sit down and stop thinking about that. All right, let's see. There was lease options, seller financing, credit cards, family money, line of credit from the bank, hard money, equity partnerships with sellers. All right, where am I at? 7 or 8 now. Gosh, I think most of them I have in my book, but I all of those ways I've gotten deals done. Some I recommend, some I actually do not absolutely do not recommend. But they all led to some form of lesson and some form of education and experience, which ultimately turned out to be a success for me. But not all of those ways of financing deals. Credit card, I wasn't a real good one. But yeah, I've done it. Hey, you name it, I've done it.
Got it. So let's do this. Let's dive into a couple of these.
All
So
right.
I think a big one people talk about a lot is seller financing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So seller financing is like, it seems like the ultimate. I find, in my mind, mom and pop owner or whatever that has paid off their property. They fully own it. There's no debt. Let's just say that's the scenario. Or maybe you would say, actually, it's more when there is some debt on it that you get creative with this. But talk to us about, well, I guess first, what is seller financing? And what are some of the things that you need to consider or do to really be effective? Because 402 units leveraging creative financing methods, that's impressive. I know another guy that's done like 150 single family homes, all seller financed. And to get my head around that is tough. Yeah. So talk to me about seller financing. What is it and how have you leveraged it? What are some tactics people can use?
Yeah, sure. Well, seller financing is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The seller of the property, the owner, is going to be the one to carry a mortgage or create financing for you. So step one, they cannot have a mortgage. But there's some caveats there, but basically for a seller to give you a loan, they themselves cannot have a loan on the property, not to do traditional financing. Now, maybe your down payment to them, if there is any, would allow them to pay off that first mortgage if there was. But if there is a first mortgage in place, senior debt from a traditional lender, right, they're going to have a due on sale clause, meaning that seller is not going to be able to transfer that property to you without paying off the primary mortgage. So there's no way they can really give you seller financing. Now, there are other techniques that we can use. I prefer a master lease option or a lease option. We can discuss that separately. Some people like to do what they call subject to financing, where you kind of leave the loan in place, seller's loan in place, and you just pay the payments to the bank. But let's be clear, that's not seller financing. That's something different. Seller financing, the seller has to have 100% equity. And they're going to be the bank, and they're going to give you a mortgage on the property. That's probably, of all the creative financing techniques, my favorite. Reason being is it's the safest and it makes the most money because there's going to be a proper transfer of title. There's a real closing here. This is just like you bought the property. You just, instead of paying the seller with money from the bank, you're paying the seller with their own money, right? Seller financing. They're probably going to want some down payment. That's a negotiable amount. There's going to be an interest rate, obviously a negotiable amount. But one of the big points that, I want to kind of back up and discuss, besides seller financing or lease options or any of the ways that I've ever done real estate, there's one thing you have to understand. And if you take away nothing else from the call tonight, you got to take away this one thing: create value with your offer. That's the magic. If your offer is not creating value, you are not going to succeed with any form of financing, be it seller financing or traditional or anything else. So 90% of a good deal is seller. 10% is real estate, right? If you don't have a seller that's willing to do business, you got squat. So now we're talking about creative financing. All right, we can talk about lease options and seller financing, all these different things. Those are tools, right? Those are instruments that we're going to use to create value. But if you are not creating value, the instrument is irrelevant, right? If you're not creating value for the seller, it doesn't matter what kind of technique we're talking about, they're all irrelevant. So whether it's seller financing or anything else we're going to talk about, remember, you've got to sit down and look at this deal and say, why would the seller do this? What value am I bringing to the seller? What problem am I solving? And there's the key. So, you really got to sit down and look at the deal, analyze the deal and say, why is this person in trouble? What's their need? What's going on here? Now let's talk about, does this offer solve that problem or that need? Okay, then you say, well, what do we need? What tool do we need to solve the problem? Is it seller financing? Is it lease option? Is it one of these other techniques? Right? That's kind of the order in which you get there. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of people make, is that they look at a deal, they analyze the deal, and they say, how does this work for me? What's good for me? What do I make? What do I want? And they make an offer that really kind of solves their problems without a lot of concept to the seller. And then they wonder why they're struggling to get any kind of creative financing offer accepted. It's because you're not creating value. So in my book, I talk about a SPY technique. And this is something that I think is extremely important. It's an acronym called SPY. It stands for seller, property, you. That's the order in which you want to analyze deals. And that's the order in which you want to try and apply any kind of creative financing, whether it be seller financing or otherwise, to an offer. Look at the seller. What's going on? Why is the seller selling? Not what they told you, but what do they really want? What motivates them? You might have to ask them a couple of times if they're selling, what are they going to do with the money? What are they doing with the proceeds? Where are they going to go? What's their plan for the capital? These are all kinds of things you want to find out about the seller. Okay, now we look at the property. What's going on with the property? Is it distressed? Does it need work? Is it bad repair? What's going on here? All right, does my offer solve whatever issue is on the asset? And then lastly, does this offer fit me? Does it create value for me? And is it a good thing? Is this a good deal, right? That, if you'll use that SPY technique, you'll increase your closing probability tenfold, regardless of what kind of technique you're using, any technique. But now that we've covered that, now we can talk about seller financing. We can talk about lease options. We can talk about these individual tools. Then we have a grander concept of how we're going to use these tools. And if you're not creating value, you're wasting your time. But that's kind of my soapbox on that one. But yeah, seller financing specifically is like we said, it's the seller holding a mortgage. Why would they do that? Well, two main reasons. One, the asset is not fundable by traditional financing. Now that's why I kind of opened that loop in the beginning and said, hey, I think there's some stuff coming in the future. That a bull market, which means an up market, right? A market that is going up. A bull market never dies of old age. It's murdered every time, right? A good market is taken out behind a tool shed and shot every single time. Why? Lenders, debt does it. Debt always throttles back to lending. They raise the rates either because of inflation or they throttle back other terms because they see too much trade volume, which we're seeing right now. They start tightening up on financing, and that starts to immediately make an area in the world that becomes distressed owners, right? Seller, property, you. Okay, well now we know the seller's got a problem. What problem? Their property's not in great shape. Okay, and they want to sell it for a lot of money. Yeah, but you can't go get a loan from the bank. Why? Because the property's distressed. Now the seller has a problem, and it's your job to identify it and explain to them why this situation. Okay, so the seller wants to sell. The asset isn't going to really go get very good financing from a bank. What do? Now you reach out for seller financing, a lease option, partnership, whatever the case, and you solve it in that order. So that's kind of how we get to these different tools and why someone would accept seller financing. The property is not going to be financed at a bank is a biggie. Number two, taxes. They don't want to pay a lump sum in capital gains tax. That's a great way. If you've got somebody with a lot of equity in a property, and and you're talking to them about seller financing, always remind them that they may pay old Uncle Sam a big chunk of that profit right there. Why not? Especially in commercial real estate, it's not homestead, right? So you're going to pay capital gains on that. It's not a house. So by doing seller financing, they're only going to pay taxes on the interest or the profit. And so that's another way that you can kind of spread out their tax liability and really save them a lot of money. Those are two major reasons why someone would do seller financing and basically what seller financing is. So hope that wasn't too long-winded of an answer for you.
No, that's good. I was going to ask you what the common objections might be. Actually, maybe I will. So these are the issues why they can't be financed. I'm sorry. These are the reasons why somebody should seller finance. Assets not fundable and the tax burden. But even with that, are there common objections that you've heard from sellers and maybe a couple of tips to overcome those?
Yeah. Number one, who are you? What resume? How many times have you done this before? You're not a safe bet. That's probably going to be to lack of experience or lack of closing, something along those lines. That's going to be one of your big objections. Depending on the size of property that you're trying to go up and get into, you may need partners. You may need to partner with somebody, that brings a little bit of that credibility. That's going to be a big one. The other one would probably be they don't understand the problem that they have. Right. And so they don't understand that they have a problem. If someone doesn't know they have a problem, they don't have a problem. Not true. They really do. They just don't know they do. Right. So this is actually what I call the ugly baby syndrome. All right. So I'll be offensive here because I'm not a parent, but for everybody who's got kids out there, right? Look, everybody thinks their kid's cute. There's sure as hell some ugly people in this world. Somebody was wrong. I'm just saying somebody somewhere was wrong. Right?
I'm with you. Absolutely.
This is
Not my
this
kids.
is
My kids are very cute.
I actually saw one of your kids. Your kids are cute. I saw him in the
They're
background.
good.
Totally vouched for you. Everybody else, I'm not sure, but your kids are cute. So no, but here's the thing, and this is the way we translate this into real estate is sometimes a seller has a distressed asset, but they don't know it. They think the sun shines out there, real estate rear end, right? And they want this big giant price for it, all this kind of stuff. And you're looking at the property going, you're out your mind. This place is in disrepair. The tenants aren't paying. You got plumbing issues. You got this, that, and the other. And the seller thinks that they're supposed to get some kind of gigantic price for it. Well, the catch here is they have an ugly baby. They just don't know it. And it's your job to go in there and educate them that their kid's not as cute as they thought, without bursting their bubble, without being negative, and that's the key. So you got to go in and kind of explain to them, listen, you're right, I love you, mean it, you're awesome, property's awesome, everybody's awesome. It's that evil bank over there. See, this is where all good cop, bad cop at every time. The evil bank, I love the property, but when I went in there to get a loan, they said because the roof's collapsing, the tenants aren't paying rent, for some strange reason, they didn't want to do a loan on this. Yeah. Go figure. I'm getting extreme. You see my point. It's like you've got to kind of educate the seller as to why you're bringing them this kind of offer. That's how you start creating value, is if they don't know that they have a problem, you have to identify the problem, and then you have to show them why your solution or your offer is a solution to that problem. That's what I call the ugly baby syndrome. No offense to anybody who has kids.
No, not at all. I like that. All right.
We got a way of
yeah, we got a question or two in the chat here. Jake is asking, isn't subject to, you mentioned subject to, so maybe explain that a little bit first. Isn't it generally not allowable by most financial institutions? I've heard that too. So I'd be curious to hear you talk about first, can you explain subject to, and then, how you finance it?
Subject to is a short term or short phrase for saying subject to financing. And so it's saying, what we're saying is all right, like Jamie, you have a house or a property and I want to buy it, but you have a mortgage on it. And so I say, hey, I'll take your property subject to the existing financing. So what we'll do is you just leave your mortgage in place. We won't say anything to the bank. I'll take over operations. It's not a closing, so I'm not transferring the title from you to me, obviously, because there's still a loan over there. But I'll start making the payments for you. So I'll just make those payments to the bank. I'll collect the cash flow and do whatever, and I'll just make the payments, for you and put subject to. Yes, it is a violation of the due on sale clause. We already pointed this out. Number one, and again, this is not a negative comment that a lot of people out here that teach subject to. I think it's a crap thing to do. Personally, I think it's garbage financing. I think it's a phenomenally good way to get yourself sued. If you don't make the payments, the seller doesn't make the payments. What if they try to sell the property? It's a messy form of financing. There's a much better way to do it. It's called a lease option or a master lease option. It's a much better way than subject to. But I know a lot of people like subject to, and they teach it. But me personally, I think it's a horrible concept. But that's subject to, and that is how you do it. And yeah, there are no lending institutions that I know of that allow it at all. Number one, so it's not gonna happen.
Well, let's go
call the loan if they find out. By the way,
yeah, let's talk master lease or lease option. Can you give a little bit of what that is and maybe an example on that?
Yeah, a lease option is exactly what that sounds like. It's your a lease with the option to buy the property in the future. All right, so I'm renting a property with the right to buy it someday. So again, Jamie, you now have this house or this apartment complex, and for whatever reason, you're a burned out landlord, you're tired, you don't want to deal with it. I come in and say, hey, listen, this property is in pretty bad shape. If I could just borrow it for a minute, I'm not gonna pay you, but if I just borrow your property for a minute, I could get it fixed up. I could bring the elbow grease, the sweat equity, fix it up, but I don't want to do that for free. Why would I fix up your property, so you can make a whole lot of money? So I tell you what, rent me this property, all right? And you and I will do two things. We'll agree on a time frame that I'm going to get to rent the property. And number two, we're going to go ahead and pick a price today based on the value of the property today. And I'm going to have the same amount of time to rent your property and actually buy it at the same time. So what I'm doing is I'm saying a lease in one hand and an option to purchase in another. So I'm going to rent the property. It's two different documents. I'm going to rent your property as a renter with the right to sublet. Right? So I want to be able to sublet. I don't want to live there. I want to rent it out to some other renter, right? And then I'm going to go in and do the work and get the value up. But again, if I get the value up, I want to benefit from that. So, I would go ahead and agree on $1 million sale price for this multifamily property today. And the idea is that while I'm leasing it out or while I'm renting it, I'm going to go in and get the value up to, let's say, $2 million. but I still have the option to purchase with you for $1 million. Right? So now I can go and close in the deal and buy this property that's worth twice what the option price is. All right. So now there are some catches in there. You're a renter. Okay. It is not a refinance. And that's a big thing you got to understand with a lease option is that if you go to buy the asset, the bank is going to tell you to put down 20%, 25%, whatever, of the purchase price or the appraisal, whichever is lower. Well, in this case, we know the purchase price is going to be lower. Our purchase price agreed on was $1 million, but I made the property worth $2 million. So can't I just go ahead and borrow 80% of $2 million? No, they're going to give you 80% of the $1 million. So you're still going to bring $200,000 to the table. Yes, but I'm buying a property for $1 million that is now worth $2 million. So that's roughly what a lease option is. When we do it with multiple units, it becomes a master lease option. That's the only difference. Right? So it's the same concept. As if it's one house or something, it's a lease option. If it's a multiple unit property, master lease option. Exact same concept. But it's a rent to own. I'm going to rent it from you. I'm going to come in, straighten this thing out, bring the value up with the right to buy it someday in the future. And that's what a lease option, master lease option is for. So you want to try and find properties that you can bring up in value and that are also in areas that may in the future go up in value. But again, the idea is to take over something that a lender would not finance. Because let's be clear, if you can go over to the bank and get a loan and buy the property and put some money down, you should do it. But if you can't get financing, not because you suck, but because the property sucks, that's what creative financing is for. It's for going in there and straightening out these sellers' issues, and bringing the value of these assets up and then making us the money by solving the seller's problems. That's roughly what that's all for.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. There's a couple questions in here, and one I want to touch on before we get to this. There's another follow-up on seller financing. We'll come back to that, and then we'll go into. I do want to hear your sort of thoughts on the future. But one question here is about finding deals, which is a great question this time, right? Because trying to come across deals that make sense or seem to make sense has been difficult. Some feel like they have to change maybe their parameters. Maybe I can't get quite the return I used to, but I'm still going to buy at X return or whatever the case may be. What has been the most effective way for you to find deals, let's say in the last year, or just generally, I guess, but especially in the last year?
Lots of different answers to that. It depends on what you're trying to buy, and for what. So let me break that down into several different questions. How do I find deals? How do I find creative financing deals? And how do I find big or small deals? Those are all sort of 4 different questions in there. So how do I find creative financing deals? I don't. You don't. You analyze deals the exact same way you always analyze deals. When one will not fit with traditional financing, then you pull out the creative financing tools. So instead of throwing it in the trash and saying this deal doesn't work, I'm saying, hold on, pull the deal back out of the trash and now apply a few of these creative techniques to it. And we'll see if we just can't increase our probability of close. That's what creative financing is for. It's increasing probability. It's not a one-stop shop. You go out and find all lease option deals or all seller financing deals. No, if you go around looking for deals like that, you're going to come off like a deadbeat. If you start calling up realtors or sellers and going, hey, do you have any seller financing laying around? Got any lease option deal? You sound like you have no money. You sound like you can't close your way out of a wet paper bag, right? Nobody's interested in doing business with that kind of person. So you never ask or look for creative financing. You just look to analyze the deals the exact same way you've always analyzed deals. I see your question over here. Driving for dollars, letters, yes, all of those. Realtors, yes, absolutely. Everything. However you look at deals, the answer is yes. When it doesn't work for traditional financing, then creative. That's how you do that. Now, how am I finding deals? Well, that depends. My suggestion right now in the markets we're in, the way the state of the market is right now, if you're looking for 50 units and under, you really want to be going direct to seller. If you guys are doing houses, small multifamily, up to 30, 40, 50 units, strongly recommend that you try and reach out to owners directly. Letters work well. Cold calling works well. I'll give you a quick tip on that. If you're going to start reaching out to sellers directly, be able to make an offer on the first phone call. So I can easily, if you call me up and say, I got a property to sell, I can make you an offer on that first phone call. What I can do is I can do the math pretty quickly. So if it's houses, I'm going to know what the general values in the areas are. I may not make an offer that's a set in stone contract offer, but I'm going to pull out some kind of offer. If you're in multifamily, The catch there is those properties are all analyzed by the financials, you know. So if you put out a letter or cold call some seller and say, hey, are you interested in selling your property? And they say, yeah, I'm interested. What do you want to pay? And you go, oh, I don't know. Give me all your financial information. Well, that's like a stick up, right? I mean, you're like mugging them. You're calling up some stranger and telling them to give you all your financial. It's not going to happen. It comes off very wrong. How do I know? Right? So what you got to do there is to be able to create an offer quickly. So you want to kind of just roughly ask the seller, hey, how many units? What's the rent per those units? Multiply that by 12, there's your annual income. You take an expense ratio. It's a larger apartment complex, we're going to say about 50% for expenses, right? What's left is your net operating income. You take that and you just do a quick cap rate calculation. I know we're not going into the details of how to do this, but you just do a quick cap rate calculation. There's your offer. I can do that back of the napkin offer. And so you want to be able to do that on any level of real estate that you're trying to reach out to sellers. Be able to make a verbal offer pretty quick over the phone. Here's what I do. I'll say, hey, well, Mr. and Miss Seller, that's great. Yeah. How many units? Great. Okay. So times this, times that. Ma'am, sir, I could get you an offer of around here to here, and I could really tighten that up though, if I had your financials. See, now we base our offers on financial information. I know you don't know me. See how I couch that? I didn't come straight in and say, hey, give me your financials. I came in and said, hey, I'm somewhere in this range of value. I could really probably go more, but I couldn't do that without this information. See, now I've kind of vetted that seller, and they're either going to say, oh, no, there's no way I would sell it only for double that amount. Okay, now I know I'm wasting my time. Say, great, thank you, and move on. If the seller kind of bites somewhere in that range, then I kind of want to ease into give me some financial information. So that's my quick tip on how to, make offers and do stuff like that quickly. So small deals under 50 units, straight to the seller, be ready to make an offer on the first call. 50 units and over, commercial realtors.
I love that. A couple follow-ups. You said 50% is kind of your rule of thumb, and I know this is just back of the napkin for larger multi-units. Do you go with a higher or lower percentage for, say, up to 20 units? Is there a higher, lower percentage that you use for expenses?
Yeah. So you're not going to see the 50% expense ratio until you're probably about 75 to 100 units. So anywhere from, say, 10 units. Well, let me say this, that you hit about 50% expense ratio at about 75 and up. All right. So the range from maybe 75 units down to 50 or 40 units is probably going to be more like 40, 45%. You get maybe sort of 35 units down to maybe 20 units. You're probably in the 30% expense range, roughly. And again, you can always kind of double check that with some management companies in your area. So those are just general rules of thumb. But yeah, like a duplex is not going to have 50% expense ratio. It's not. That's way, way too high.
You're making me, I walked away from a 10 unit about 2 hours ago and didn't make an offer. Now I'm thinking, man, I should have. Now I have a new method, Bill. So thank you for that. I have a new way to approach this. I'm gonna make a call.
We should have done this call earlier this afternoon.
I know. Timing is everything, right? And my timing is,
isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, so that is very interesting. My mind just kind of went down a rabbit hole there. So let me kind of re-engage here. You talked about with seller financing, and there's a question here about getting through to an agent. Or getting through a broker when it comes to seller financing. So the person's question essentially is, hey, look, it's hard for me to get these questions answered when there's a broker involved. How do you overcome that when you are trying to be creative with financing?
Yeah, absolutely. First comment, understand that yes, this market is hot right now and has been over the last 5 or so years, but we've got some shifts coming. And so the things that have not worked in the past are going to work in the future. So if you've struggled with some of these techniques in the past, you're going to have a lot easier time with them going forward because there's going to be more distressed assets. There's going to be more ugly babies in the world, and those are all things that need to be solved. And the catch right now, what we're noticing is that sellers don't have a lot of problems. If they've got a problem on the property, they can probably just throw it out on the market, get the asking price plus $1, sell it, no problem. Why would they do it in this creativity? They wouldn't, and they're not going to. Not until they start to really have problems. They're about to. All right, number one, and I'll answer the question more specifically about the realtors, but for the problems that I think we're about to have, COVID, number one, if you're looking at anybody, any kind of rent roll, any kind of multifamily, anything like that, there are a lot of tenants not paying the rent right now. I mean, a lot. We've been in this eviction moratorium. I'm not a political person. I don't really care what they're doing with politics going forward. All I know is there's a lot of tenants that don't rent. even if they open up the gates tomorrow, you're months of getting these tenants through the court process, and then getting the sheriff to set them out, and then. There are a lot of people that are really going to hit some financial problems here real soon, and that's where we're going to have a lot more availability of these deals. Number one, that's going to be the realtors are going to be the first one to kind of get slapped with that. They're going to see their deals fall apart. They're going to accept that really high offer, and they're going to great, we got a great price for this property, awesome, and then it leaves. Why? Because the person put in too big of an offer. They didn't know how to analyze the deal. They went over to the bank, and the bank said, "What are you, stupid? We're not doing a loan on this kind of price here. We'll do a loan here." Oops. Now all of a sudden, the seller has to go back to the realtor and say, "Hey, I really can't get an 80% loan. I can only get 70, 75%. They want me to put up escrow for the old roofs and the old plumbing and blah, blah, blah." The deal doesn't work. Retrades. That's going to be the first wave of watch. As you start watching some of these deals, track them. They're on the market and you're looking at that price, but that is a silly price. Watch it. I bet you'll see that thing. Just because it went under contract does not mean it sells. Watch those deals. You'll see a lot of them fall back out from under contract. That's when the agents are going to get a lot more receptive. Generally speaking, the way that you work with an agent is number one is what I call don't kill the messenger, right? So don't just haul off and submit some sort of creative offer to an agent. That's not a good idea. What you want to do is you start back over with the ugly baby syndrome. Sit down with the realtor and say, "Hey, listen, love you, mean it, property's awesome, everybody's awesome, but the lender says," and you start with that narrative. You kind of say, "Hey, look, I can't get a great loan because of this, this, and this." Now you look at the realtor and you say, "So what do you suggest? What can we do to get the deal done?" I already know what I'm going to suggest, but I'm asking, what do you suggest? I'm getting buy-in from the realtor. And so what I want the realtor to do is to kind of squirm a little and say, "Yeah, you're right. Maybe a cash offer is not going to work." And if they don't come up with a solution, then I'll usually say something like, "Well, would your seller be interested in anything like seller financing or lease option?" Be ready to educate that seller on what those things mean if they don't, or the realtor if they don't know. Most realtors don't know what a lease option is. So you may have to kind of explain it to them. But so the key there is to not just submit the offer and make them go turn it in. That can make the realtor look bad. You don't want to get your realtor in trouble with the seller. So you sit down with the realtor, you explain why you're not making a cash offer, then ask their permission to make the offer. Say, "Hey, listen, do you see the value in this or this seller financing or lease option? If no, then fine, I'll go look at another deal." All right, that's kind of how you ease into it. And then of course, the number one objection that realtor is going to have is, "Yeah, but I'm not getting my commission. I'm not getting paid. How am I getting my money?" That's what you got to work out. And so if it's seller financing, you might there's tons and tons of ways, but maybe you give them equity. Maybe you use some of that down payment money or get the seller to use some down payment money to pay that commission. Maybe you do some cash flow share. If it's a master lease option deal, you write their commission into the agreement so that when you actually close it, remember we talked about a lease option being this thing that you're going to close someday in the future? Well, they'll get all their commissions someday in the future when you actually purchase the property. Have their commission written into the document, which you're going to go file at the courthouse against the title to cloud the title to protect yourself and the realtor. So just understand that the realtor is going to be a bit spooked. You're probably going to need to put the kid gloves on. You're going to have to explain to them why it's a valuable thing, why you're not making a cash offer, why it brings value, and then right out of the gate, how they're going to get paid. If you will follow that formula, you will increase it tremendously working with realtors. But yeah, at the same time, you have to understand if the realtor can just sell that property for full asking price somewhere, they're going to get out of the way and let them do it. And it's better to save that relationship with that realtor than to bite the hand that feeds in the short term.
Got it. Okay, that's good. I like that. That's a great answer for that. So a couple things are jumping to mind for me around underwriting, and I want to start with this question, then lead into maybe your foresight for the future. Like, what are you seeing? You kind of referenced at the beginning the open loop, right? Like, what are you seeing in the next year, 2 years that you think will have, that you think will impact every investor that's either trying to get into or is in multifamily? Yeah. But the first question, and maybe these relate, is when you're underwriting deals right now, it's hot, like you said. Like these deals, you're right. They go out. They seem like, well, I just saw one. We were looking at one property that we didn't get, and it's listed for like hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what we were in the ballpark of potentially getting under contract with this seller initially. Then he listed it, and it's way more. I just don't see it going for that. That said, it may go for still more because buyers are buying at what seems to be overpriced. The rule of thumb has always been, and Jake and Gino talk about this, right? Buy on actuals, right? Buy on actuals, buy on actuals. How much flexibility do you have in the buy on actuals, if any?
Depends. Yeah, it depends on the property. A lot, actually. And that's one of the areas that I'll disagree with them on. You buy on pro forma, you finance on actuals. That's the difference. You know what I mean? It's like anytime you sit down and say, well, can I do this with a property? Or what if we raise the rents? Or what if we do this? And that's a pro forma. So I think this concept, you always hear it, it's such a cliche comment right around you. Don't buy on pro forma. You don't buy on pro forma. No. You don't buy on the realtor's pro forma. I agree. You damn sure buy on your own pro forma. It's silly to think that you don't. You know, anytime you come up with a business plan for your property, that's a pro forma. So yes, you want to buy on actuals. But I think where the departure here is when we start to buy on an aggressive pro forma. You know, when there's no value add there other than just raising the rent. If that's all you can do is raise rent, justify overpaying for real estate, I think you're making a mistake. You know, and don't just by crushing your tenant base and impoverishing your tenants, you're going to turn this into a good deal. Careful. I don't think that's going to last long. You know, and you think about it. I mean, we're just going to raise rents, you know, forever to make every deal a good deal. You'll destroy the tenant base. They'll revolt. There's no way. I mean, I'm not even making a political comment. There's no way. What if I walked into your house and raised your mortgage 30%? You'd freak, right? It's not going to happen. And that is a financial hot potato model. It'll work until it doesn't. And what's going to happen is someone is going to be the last person to overpay, thinking, oh yeah, we're going to raise the rent. And it doesn't happen. And then they're stuck with an asset that doesn't cash flow. Okay, so what? It doesn't cash flow. They sit there and they hold on to it for 5 or 7 years. Maybe they sell it in the future, no problem. Unless it's an older building and the plumbing goes to hell and the roofs are rotten and the electrical shot to heck, you know. That's what I'm predicting is about to be a major shift in American real estate that's never occurred before. It's what I call a CapEx tsunami, capital expense tsunami, right? So the problem that we've got going on in America is that a large majority of our affordable housing was built in the 60s and 70s. Like kind of before the 1960s, when you're out looking at real estate, they're not typically those 100, 200 unit apartment complexes built in 1940. They're brownstones and smaller properties and quads and this kind of stuff, right? Well, it seems like it was sort of post-World War II, baby boomer era, 1960s, 1970s is when they really started making a lot of these pine frame construction apartment complexes. And today they're old as hell. They're our organic affordable housing, and that's what we call organic affordable housing. Affordable housing traditionally is affordable housing that's built, constructed, which is LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, things like that. That's affordable housing that was created to be that. Organic affordable housing means it's an asset that's just aged until it has become affordable. Yeah, but now it's not only affordable in its rents, the plumbing is shot, and the roofs are shot, and the infrastructure is rotten. That's why we're having a big infrastructure issue in America. You hear it in politics. I'm taking that same concept and applying it to multifamily. We have an infrastructure problem in the multifamily world, and that is the area we're going to see a really big shift. What I'm expecting is you hear about this K-shaped recovery, sort of. I'm expecting a K-shaped split in the real estate world. The A's and the B's, the newer assets are going to go up, and the C's and the D's are going to go down. You're going to see that split right between the B's and the C's. Newer, nicer assets are going to be buoyed by inflation and rising prices. The C's and the D's are going to get hit with this CapEx tsunami. Those assets have been overpriced. They've been over syndicated, over flipped, over renovated, and over rent raised. Right? They've just been overdone, period. And the one thing that everybody has ignored is the infrastructure, plumbing, electrical, subfloor, these kinds of things. And what I'm expecting is when people figure out that this is not a forecap, it's a foreclosure, that whole set of real estate is going to wind up in a whole lot of trouble. And it's those older buildings. When you start looking at that and you go, okay, hold on, you want a what price? Oh, and I got to do the plumbing and the electrical and the roof and your cost basis, purchase price plus renovation is immediately over market. Somebody's instantly in foreclosure. Either the seller who's trying to sell it or the buyer who's about to buy it. One of the two is going down with that one. It's not going to work. Well, the lever here is going to be debt. debt sees this coming, debt sends out an engineer to inspect those properties. You're going to go into one of these old buildings, and the lender's going to go, yeah, right, $1 million in escrow for repairs and maintenance, and you're going to see some retrades. And then here comes that whole cycle I was just talking about. So that's what I'm predicting, is that we're going to see a big downshift in the older buildings in the real estate category, from houses to multifamily. And that's where you're going to see the creative financing get ramped up, is in the lower end assets going forward. So that's kind of my prediction for the next. That's going to be over the next 1 to 4 years, 1 to 3 years, in that range.
Interesting. For those of us that might look in that space, in that C-class workforce housing, 70s built, maybe early 80s built property, is there 1 or 2 tips that you would give when analyzing, when looking at that deal? Like, it sounds like you're saying, hey, on the surface, it sounds like you're saying just steer clear. But at the very least, you're saying, hey, look, there's value to it, but your basis is going to be increased by, if you pay, kind of retail plus have to pay the capex. So is it a buy only on actuals, or are you very aggressive with offers? Like, what's
both. And so that's where I'm kind of saying, in that space, my number 1 tip: don't overpay. Don't chase that rabbit down the hole. You're going to get bit. Don't go chasing deals in that space. If you're going to overpay right now, overpay for something nice. Don't overpay for older buildings. And don't overpay for an older building that has low cash on cash because the realtor told you the rent was low and you could raise the rents. That's a very dangerous business model, especially in the B's and C's like that. And that's where I'm kind of thinking it's been overdone. And with the last couple of flips, the only reason those people were able to get that price is because they what I call pencil whip. They pencil whipped the deal. They made it look great on paper. We're going to raise the rents. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. Well, that looks great on paper, but can you actually make it happen? I think we've kind of hit the high froth level in the lower C space in multifamily. And so my big one is just don't overpay if you can help it. Don't overpay thinking that you're going to raise the rents and that's going to make everything okay. And then let me throw the cherry on top of that. Go pull that Census Bureau report that just came out. If you're in any one of the states that is having declining population or level population, be very, very careful. Supply and demand. So don't think that you're going to go in, and if you overpay in an area that's losing population or has stagnant population, and you think you're going to raise the rent to justify the overpayment or the low cap rate, you're already 1 foot in foreclosure. You got people leaving, people are not moving in, and you think you're going to raise the rents. Now, come on, that's high school economics. Supply and demand tells you right there that ain't going to work. So you just got to use some common sense, and I just see a lack of that, I think, in the real estate world right now.
Got it. So, yeah. Okay. I've got a question on the A and B space to kind of flip it around. But before I do that, we're coming to the top of the hour. I want to quickly talk about your book, Creative Cash. Can you give us a little bit of insight on that and where people can maybe learn more or learn more about it and follow you?
Yeah, well, the book is awesome. I'll start with that. It's called Creative Cash. It's on how to create value for these sellers using these techniques. And so, yes, I go through this book and I teach you how to use and what is seller financing or lease option or debt part. I teach you how to use all the tools, but I teach you why and where to use them and how to create value with these tools. So that's really what the book is about. It's on Amazon. I actually hit #1 bestseller a few weeks ago, so you can go check that out. Thanks. Done real well with that one. Also have a master class that you can go get if you want more involved information, and that's creativeapartmentdeals.com. So between creativeapartmentdeals.com and the book on Amazon, you can go get those 2 things. I'd be happy to give you my email address. It's bill@gobroadwell.com. So bill@gobroadwell, Broadwell, BROADWELL. So feel free to reach out to me anytime, bill@gobroadwell. And then I've got a ton of other information out there on a lot of other sites. I've done a lot of podcasts. So you can also just Google Bill Ham Real Estate. If you type Bill Ham, you'll just pull up the ZZ Top bass player who's now deceased, by the way. So I'm not that guy, not the guy with the beard. Right? So type in Bill Ham Real Estate. So that's helping me get my Google rank up. That'll pull up a ton of information.
I didn't know that. I didn't know there was a ZZ Top.
Yeah, right. Right, ZZ Top. Bill Ham. He's an old guy with the white. I'm 45 now, so I grew up watching him do that, spinning guitar and all that.
Absolutely.
I never knew that guy's name was Billy Mack Ham.
Interesting. Well, there you go.
I'm
All right.
trying to be more famous than that guy. So I'm working on it.
Ben dropped the creativeapartmentdeals.com. He dropped the link.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
In the chat. So check that out. And yeah, look, the book is really, really good. People are always asking about creative methods for financing. This book really solves that need. So check it out because it's a high value book. It is brought to you by somebody that is part of a community that I've invested in as well, in the Jake and Gino community. So appreciate that. Let's circle back real quick to A and B, and then I want to close out with one other quick question just to see if you recommend one of your other tactics here still to this day. But A and B. So you said about like the C and D, CapEx tsunami, the K-shaped kind of split between A, B, and C, D. How C and D you got to buy at the right price. You cannot overpay for it. Right. A and B, if you're going to overpay there, and inflation will take it up. Correct. My question is, and I know you don't know that. Let's just preface this: you're not Nostradamus, you have no idea. But until when? So I guess we are in an inflationary market, and all indications are that we're probably going to be in some level of that for the next few years, 3 years. But can you get caught just as easily? And how do you avoid that if you buy an A-class asset and pay full market value for it? And then, we hit a deflationary event or a black swan event or whatever the case may be. Like, how do you cap that downside?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the C space either if you don't have to sell. And that's the magic to multifamily or any kind of real estate that is an income producing asset. We only care about the price twice, on the way in and on the way out, right? When you're buying it and when you're selling it. In the middle, as long as you're cash flowing, who cares? The price plummets. So what? Don't sell it unless you have to. Now we're getting into something we don't have time for this evening, but it is in my book, and it's what I call the 3 pillars of real estate. And that's understanding debt, market cycle, and exit strategy. And so what you're asking now, Jamie, is about debt. So as long as you have a mortgage that lasts through that recession or down cycle, you're golden. If you go get short-term financing in the wrong market cycle, then all of a sudden that thing comes due and you're in a trough and you have to sell. You may be in trouble. You make money in real estate when you don't have to sell. So as long as you don't have an exit strategy that is forced, the price is irrelevant. Just sit tight, cash flow, you'll sell it in a few more years. You just hang on to it longer. That's all. It's no big deal unless you have to sell. See, and there's the key. And that's where I think a lot of people are going to make mistakes too. You're going to get short-term loans. We're going to kind of go into a trough cycle with multifamily, the lower end, the C's and the D's. Those loans are going to come due. They're going to go, how do I get out of this deal? I got a loan coming due in 6 months. Those are going to be some motivated sellers. That's where you're going to get that creativity.
Interesting. I think you've dropped enough because my mind is going into, okay, term, what kind of terms can you get depending on the size of the property, all that good stuff. So
thank you. I appreciate it.
There you go. Big tease to buy the book. And look, I would encourage everybody to do that. I mean, for the time he's put into us tonight and the amount of value we've gotten, to drop $20 on a book on Amazon.
It's like $14. I promise you'll get far more value out of it than the $14-$15 you'll spend on it. Guaranteed.
There you go.
Call me up, I'll give you money back.
Then put the Amazon link in there, Creative Cash. I want to ask this question before we wrap up here. You mentioned across all of these different creative financing things that you've done, lease options, seller financing. One jumped out at me, and I wonder if it was like sort of I did it once, I'd never do it again, or if it's something that you actually see happening again, and that is credit cards. Have you leveraged credit cards on multifamily property, or do you continue to?
No, hell no, I don't continue to. No, and yes, I have. I have leveraged and done renovations and things like that heavily on credit cards. Yeah, when I was getting started off, and that actually caused me to carry credit card debt for a lot longer than I meant to. I got caught catching the falling knife, and this is kind of actually I tell the story in the book, but kind of when markets are declining. And I was trying to refinance. I was doing the BRRRR model. So I would buy it with cash, except the difference in the BRRRR model is buy, renovate, refinance, run away. I don't remember what that's in.
Rehab,
something like that, right? Anyway, point being is that you're gonna buy the property and then renovate it and then refi it. And I was doing that, except I was doing it in a declining economy. And so after a while, each refinance appraisal came in lower than the one before, and lower and lower and lower. And I was putting back less and less on each one of those credit cards. And so I wound up just running a big giant. I got up to, heck, on my American Express card, I got up to about 75 grand on that card in credit card debt, and 30,000 in other cards. There was over 100 grand in credit card debt. That some really good looking apartments. good grief, man, that's a gift that just keeps on giving. I mean, it took me years to pay that crap off. So I don't recommend it. I have done it. Hey, I got the deal done. I closed it. I survived. I made money, and that's all that counts. But at the end of the day, there are better ways to do it.
Circling back to the original discussion point about, yes, it was something that you wouldn't do, you wouldn't recommend, and I'm not, advocating it either, but at the same time, you got it done. You're here. You can afford Apple Buds, whatever these are called. These are, you can afford those.
AirPods.
So you survived AirPods. There you go. So, I think that's something that we fear, and we hear the horror stories, and they happen. They do. People get wiped out by, deals gone wrong or whatever the case may be. But many of those people have a Phoenix-like resurrection and come back even stronger.
I've been there.
You're in there, right?
Yeah, I've been wiped out. I've been knocked down and got right back up. And I can leave you with this piece of advice. I only take financial advice from the kind of people in the world: those who have made more money than me, those who have lost more money than me. Yeah. That's it. So if anybody's got any financial advice for you, make sure they've either made more money or they've lost more money. Everybody else, tell them to go kick rocks.
Sage advice from a Southern gentleman and a hell of an investor. Bill, thank you so much, man. This was
You're
incredible.
welcome.
Great
Absolutely.
value. Yeah, no, man, I look forward to learning more and seeing more of what you do. And thanks to all of you that attended. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. You got this and more and other content. Appreciate everybody joining tonight. Absolutely. Bill, thanks again, brother. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right, guys. See ya.
Thanks, guys.